guys, hello, welcome to my channel. In today's video, we're going to be going over all of the books that are going to be released this winter. So all the books coming out in December, January, and February. And we're just going to jump straight into it with our December releases. And I do actually have two different release dates for December. The first one being December 3rd, and obviously that has already passed. So the first four books that I'm going to mention are already out. You can already get them, but they're books that I'm still really excited for, so I'm going to talk about them anyway. And the very first one is Quicksilver by Callie Hart. This is actually a re-release of a book that was previously independently published. I have actually already read this book as well, and I really loved it. I put this on this list though just because at the time of me making this list, which was like weeks ago at this point, it was in that weird kind of like middle ground where I couldn't get the independently published version anymore, and I was really bummed because I wanted the original version of this book, even though I don't think the covers ended up changing at all, but I was worried it was going to, so I really wanted the indie cover, and I am so grateful that one of you guys actually ended up sending it to me. So I already have this book, very excited about it, but I still wanted to keep it on the list anyway, just in case someone else was kind of in limbo like I was and wanted to get their hands on this book. Next one that I have is To Shatter the Night by Catherine Quinn, and this is actually the second book in a series. The first book was called To Kill a Shadow, I believe, and I read this book a while ago. I don't remember exactly. I think it was like in the beginning of the year. And I'm gonna be honest, I didn't love it. I think the overall romance kind of flopped for me, but there were some really unique aspects of the first book that I really enjoyed. So I want to give the second book a chance. Like right off the bat after reading the first one, I was like, I'm not gonna continue the series. But now that I've had some time to sit on it, I kind of want to continue. The first book is described as a fantasy horror, which definitely is what kind of like drew my attention to begin with, because I've never kind of had the combination of those two genres together, and I will say it was definitely very interesting, and those were the parts about the book that I really enjoyed, and I'm curious to see how that's gonna like follow through into the next book. And if you're kind of more curious about what the series is actually about, obviously I'm not gonna describe the second book, but the first book basically follows Jude, who is the Hand of Death, and he's the commander for our female lead. So essentially they have a little bit of like a forbidden romance, if you will, and then they end up going on some kind of like journey together. I don't remember why. With a kingdom on the verge of collapse, the knights must now venture into the darkest heart of the land and uncover the secrets of the misted shadows, where evil will prey upon their minds and feast on their flesh. So even in that little sentence, you can kind of hear a little bit of that like horror genre kind of like sneaking in. So that's kind of like that book, that series. Moving on. The next book that we have is The Last One by Rachel Housel Hall. And I wrote down in my notes that the synopsis was vague, but it's a fantasy romance. And literally, that's all I need to know to want to read a book. Fantasy romance is definitely like hands down my favorite genre. But let's go ahead and skim over the synopsis again, just to kind of like see if, I don't know, maybe when I was making my notes, I just like wasn't grasping the concept or something. I just read over the synopsis again, and it is pretty vague. The first part of it though does sound really intriguing. So it says, Kai wakes up in the woods with no idea who she is or how she got there. And then it kind of jumps straight into her seeing a blacksmith fight some invaders, and she accepts his offer for help, but there's literally no backstory on like why she needs help or anything about the blacksmith. It says, as she searches for answers, Kai only finds more questions, especially regarding the blacksmith who can ignite her body like a flame, then douse it with ice in the next breath. And then it says, and no one is what or who they appear to be, including the man whose secrets might be as deadly as the land itself. Yeah, it is, again, it is pretty vague. It's just about Kai, who doesn't know who she is or what she is, and she's asking a blacksmith for help. They're gonna have a romance. That's all I'm getting from the synopsis, but it's enough to intrigue me. And then the last book that we have for December 3rd is Under Lock and Key by Lana Ferguson. I am so excited for this book. This is from the author that wrote The Fake Mate, which I just read in October, and I absolutely loved it. It was a fake dating, like paranormal romance between two wolf shifters. And this one, Under Lock and Key, is about a Loch Ness monster shifter. I feel like that sounds so random, but I'm so here for it. And I am going to kind of just like move on and not talk about the synopsis for this one, because I'm already just like so intrigued, and I kind of want to go into it more blind. Like I want to be more surprised. But what I will say is, just from reading The Fake Mate, I want to read everything else that Lana Ferguson has written. There was a point where I was reading The Fake Mate that I had to like stop and like appreciate the fact that the smallest little things and interactions that the characters were having were giving me butterflies and just making me like so excited for them. I'm very excited to kind of jump into another romance by her. So there's that one. Now moving on to our second second release day for December, which is the 17th, and I only have one book. It's called North in the Night by Emily Rath, and I did write down in my notes that it was Finnish folklore, which that in and of itself is enough to get me to want to read it. I love a book centered around folklore. I just find that stuff very, very interesting. And just from the cover of this book, it's very wintry looking, which is very intriguing to me as well, especially for the winter season. So this one says, in the Finnish wilderness, more than wolves roam the dark forests. For Siri and Anya, I don't know if I'm saying those names correctly, but that's how I'm going to say them. Summer's fading light is a harbinger of unwelcome change. Land-hungry Swedes venture north, threatening the peace. A zealous Christian priest denounces the old ways, and young women have begun to disappear. Siri vows to protect Anya from danger, but even Siri cannot stop a death goddess from dragging her friend to Tunella, the mythical underworld. In Tunella, the cruel witch queen turns Anya's every waking moment into a living nightmare, but armed with compassion and cleverness, Anya learns the truth of her capture. The king of the underworld himself has plans for her. To return home, Anya must bargain her heart as Siri plots a daring rescue of the woman she loves the most. I feel like there's so many things going on in that. We basically got two friends. One of them gets captured. There's a queen, there's a king, all kinds of things. So those are the few books that I have written down for December to be released, but I did want to quickly mention a few other books that were released a little bit earlier in the year, but they're very Christmassy and December-y, so I wanted to mention them in case you might be interested in trying to find like a Christmas specific read. And the first one is How My Neighbor Stole Christmas by Megan Quinn. I feel like I've mentioned this a couple of times in recent videos, but the cover of this very much has the Grinch vibes, and that's literally the only thing I needed to add it to my December TBR, but for the sake of this video, let's kind of review the synopsis. It says, every Kringle in Kringleton celebrated Christmas a lot, but Cole Black on Whistler Lane unfortunately did not. As his fellow citizens decorate their quaint town, brimming with carols and glad tidings, Cole wants nothing more than to hibernate the winter away, but his dreary plans are thwarted when his Christmas nemesis, Story Taylor, moves in next door to care for her aunt, Cindy. Immediately, the new neighbors turn his life into a real nightmare before Christmas, especially when she decides to enter the town Christmas Kringle contest in honor of Cindy. And better yet, Story is determined to win. Over Cole's dead body, she will. With help from his friend Max. I literally cannot get over the Grinch references. I need to read this like immediately. With help from his friend Max, Cole decides to enter the competition as well to beat Story at her own game by pretending that this hometown grump's heart has grown 3 sizes this season and he's fallen for the girl next door. But the competition isn't the only thing that heats up. Cole and Story's fake relationship becomes very real, yada yada yada. Romance ensues. This sounds like so much fun. Next up I have The Christmas Tree Farm by Lori Gilmore. This is the third book in this series. I don't know what it's called. The first one I gave a 3 stars to. It wasn't my most favorite book, but I liked it enough to continue the series, and I'm really glad that I did because the second book, the bookshop one, I related so much to the FMC, and just the overall plot of that one was just very cute. So I'm very excited for The Christmas Tree Farm. This one is about someone that just purchased a Christmas tree farm, even though she like hates Christmas. But then we also have the brother of the FMC from the first book. Basically, the whole premise of this series is kind of similar to Chestnut Springs in the sense of we have a group of friends and each book has their own kind of like romance involving one of these friends, and the stories just in general kind of like intertwine all of their lives and stuff, and you get to learn about all of them and the little town that they live in, which is the cutest little like Hallmark version of a town that you can think of. But also the books are spicy. And then the final little Christmassy book that I have is actually a novella. This one is My December Darling by Lauren Asher. And this is actually another one that I don't really know anything about. I just saw that it was by Lauren Asher. It's on Kindle Unlimited. It's a novella, so it'll be quick. So let's go ahead and see what this one is about together. Okay, so we have Catalina and Luke. Actually, you know what? I don't really want to know what this one's about. I like to go into books more surprised, so I don't typically read synopses very often. And because this one is a novella, I kind of want to read it even less. Like, I don't want anything spoiled because it's going to be so short anyway, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So here's an idea for a Christmas book if you're into that, if you like Lauren Asher as an author, and I'm going to leave it at that. Moving on to our January releases, I do have quite a few release dates for this month. The first one being the 7th. And the first book that we have is Mystery Royale by Caitlin Cavalencia. This one intrigued me because of the cover. It looks like it has kind of like a fun murder mystery type of vibe, and I'm all for that. The Inheritance Games meets Hotel Magnifique, which I loved the Inheritance Games, so that's very intriguing to me. And then Hotel Magnifique I have not read, but it's definitely something that's been on my radar. This one is about a 16-year-old whose mom has passed, And before she passed, she basically told her, run if the strange finds you. But she kind of like pushed that warning to the side because it says, mysterious warnings, don't pay the bills or help take care of her grand. So she's just kind of like struggling through life trying to figure things out. And she starts receiving mysterious letters in different places. She uncovers an invitation from Stoutmeyer Estate to compete in a game of Mystery Royale for the chance at a sizable inheritance. And that's kind of where the inheritance games kind of comes in, because the person hosting the Mystery Royale is Xavier Stoutmeyer, who is a recluse without an heir. And I guess the mystery is them trying to figure out who killed him. So I'm pretty excited for this book. I think it sounds like it's gonna be a lot of fun. Next up we have Lies on the Serpent's Tongue by Kate Pearsall, something like that. And this is another one that was purely a cover grab because the cover of this is so pretty. This one is basically about an 18-year-old girl who can smell the lies on people's breath, and then her sister can taste other people's feelings. So right off the bat, those two things, like immediately, yes please, I want to read this. So I really don't need to know anything else, frankly, but the rest of the synopsis basically talks about how her old rival shows up on her front doorstep like bloodied and bruised up and basically needs her help. For what? I don't really know. I guess maybe to find out who attacked him, because it says that the town has been having like weird disappearances and like weird things are happening. So I'm assuming the two of them or maybe the three of them like team up to figure out what's going on in their town. And it does sound like there's going to be some sort of romance. So very, very excited for that one. And then the next book that we have is For One Night Only by Jessica James. And this one in particular, to be brutally honest, is not a concept that I think I'm going to love, but I thought the cover was really cute, so I'm willing to give it a shot. This one is very kind of like celebrity based. I've read a few books in the last couple of years that kind of revolved around celebrities and I didn't love them. That's just kind of like a trope or a genre or whatever that I'm just like really not into. But this one's basically a romance between two former bandmates and they have to like fake date for publicity purposes and things like that. Their band is having like a reunion concert and they used to date in the past, so they're gonna like fake date presently to kind of like get attention for the concert. And there's that. I'm sure there's other things involved in that, but that's about all I want to get into. So next up we have The Starlight Heir by Amelia Howard. This one says, a bladesmith blessed by the stars, a prince with a dangerous secret, a god bound in shadows. When the gold-dusted court invitation arrives at Sierra's forge, she believes it's a joke. Nobles might seek her skills as a bladesmith, but she has no qualifications as a potential bride for the crown prince. But what awaits her in Kildare is nothing she could have imagined. It's not the crown prince, but his impossibly handsome, illegitimate half-brother who captures her interest. The invitation isn't a quest to find a suitable bride, but a veiled hunt for the Starkeeper, a girl rumored to hold the magic of the stars in her blood. That sounds so interesting. There's a little bit more to the synopsis, but I'm gonna leave it at that. And then the last release that we have for the 7th is Breath of a Dragon by Fonda Lee and Shannon Lee. This one also has a really cool cover. A young warrior dreams of proving his worth in the elite Guardian tournament, fighting not only for himself, but the fate of everything he loves. So this one has a tournament in it, which that in and of itself, completely sold. I'm gonna scroll through the synopsis really quickly to see if there's anything else that kind of stands out to me. His family is banished, and that's one of the reasons he's basically wanting to go do the tournament, and he's doing it against his father's wishes. June's father strictly forbids him from participating. He believes that there is no future in June honing his skills as a warrior, especially considering he is not breath-marked, born with a patch of dragon scales, and blessed with special abilities like his twin. Love that. That definitely adds some more intrigue to the story. And then the rest of the synopsis basically says that he stows away and joins the competition anyway. But also too, I'm really loving the fact that the main character is a male, because I feel like I don't really read that many books involving men as the leads, unless it's a romance and you get kind of like dual POVs, but even then I feel like you mostly get the female's kind of point of view, which also, this did not sound at all like it was going to be a romance, so that's another thing that's different. I haven't really read, I don't think, any fantasy novels, aside from like cozy fantasies, that didn't have any kind of romance involved in them. So I think it'll be a little bit different for me, but I'm excited for it. Next release day that we have for January is January 14th. And the very first book that we have is one that I have been waiting months and months and months for. I'm so excited. And that's Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. I read a few Grady Hendrix books last October and I love his writing. Also just him as an author, he seems to be a very like fun dude. And that just makes me even more excited to like read more from him. I honestly didn't even read the synopsis for this book. I just added it to the list because Grady Hendrix is definitely an auto-buy author for me, which he does write horror books. They call them the wayward girls, loose girls, girls who grew up too fast, and they're sent to Wellwood House in St. Augustine, Florida, where unwed mothers are hidden by their families to have their babies in secret, to give them up for adoption, and most importantly of all, to forget any of it ever happened. That sounds so sad. 15-year-old Fern arrives at the home in the sweltering summer of 1970, pregnant, terrified, and alone. Under the watchful eye of the stern Miss Wellwood, she meets a dozen other girls in the same predicament. There's Rose, a hippie who insists she's going to find a way to keep her baby and escape to a commune, and Zinnia, a budding musician who plans to marry her baby's father, and Holly, a wisp of a girl barely 14, mute and pregnant by no one knows who. Everything the girls eat, every moment of their waking day, and everything they're allowed to talk about is strictly controlled by the adults who claim they know what's best for them. Then Fern meets a librarian who gives her an occult book about witchcraft, and power is in the hands of the girls for the first time in their lives. But power can destroy as easily as it creates, and it's never given freely. There's always a price to be paid, and it's usually paid in blood. I mean, the setup of that definitely sounds kind of sad and depressing, but very, very intrigued by that. Next book that we have is Beautiful Ugly by Alice Feeney, who is typically a thriller writer. I've read 2 books in the past by Alice Feeney, one of which I didn't really care for, and the other one I did really like, so I'm definitely willing to continue on the Alice Feeney journey to see what books I like of hers. Author Grady Green is having the worst, best day of his life. Grady calls his wife to share some exciting news as she is driving home. He hears Abby slam on the brakes, get out of the car, then nothing. When he eventually finds her car by the cliff edge, the headlights are on, the driver's door is open, her phone is still there. But his wife has disappeared. A year later, Grady is still overcome with grief and desperate to know what happened to Abby. He can't sleep and he can't write, so he travels to a tiny Scottish island to try to get his life back on track. Then he sees the impossible, a woman who looks exactly like his missing wife. And then that's literally the end of the synopsis. I'm gonna be honest, like I'm definitely intrigued, but that also sounds like something I might end up not liking or not loving. So we'll see how that goes. I'm definitely gonna read it at some point. Moving on to our next release day for January, we have the 21st, and I only have one book, and it is The Wild Trials by Mackenzie Reed. And this is from the author of The Rosewood Hunt, which is actually a book that I featured in another release video. I don't remember which one. I think it was for spring, maybe. I still have not read that book yet, but it's another one that gives me kind of like Inheritance Games vibes, so I'm intrigued to give it a read. Like I still do want to read it at some point. So this one is about a competition, The Wild Trials, that actually happen at a like private school, a boarding school, and it's an annual competition where a dozen seniors are chosen to compete in a series of 7 ultimate physical and mental tests, and the winner will take home over $500,000. That's kind of crazy for like a boarding school's prize to be $500,000. And our main character, Chloe, wants to go into the competition because she has a sick sister. The competition is fierce and includes her brooding ex-boyfriend, Hayes, whose brother was the only student to die during the trials a few years ago. When someone starts blackmailing Chloe during the competition, she's forced to strike a deal with Hayes. If he helps her discover who is sabotaging her, she'll help him solve the mystery his brother left behind. That definitely sounds interesting. There's a little bit more to the synopsis, but I'm gonna go ahead and leave it at that. Next up, we have our last release day for January, which is the 28th. And the first book that we have is The Night is Defying by Chloe Penuranada. I feel like I'm butchering that last name. I'm so sorry. But this is the second book in a series. The first book was called The Stars Are Dying, which I just recently purchased, like I think a month or 2 ago. I have not read it yet, but I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna get this book regardless because the covers and the sprayed edges of these books are so stinking pretty. And I have already talked about the first book in this series in a different release video, so I'm not going to go over it again. I had a lot of you in the comments say that the first book was really, really good. So if you are one of those people that have already read the first book and you're waiting for the second one, it's coming out soon. Next up, we had Where Did You Go by Jeanne O'Reilly. I don't know if I'm saying that name correctly, but this is actually the third book in a series. The first book is called How Does It Feel? And the second one is What Did You Do? And this is another series that I have not started yet, but for whatever reason, just looks really intriguing to me. I believe it's about the Fae, which is immediately always a yes. I think these are also kind of spicy. I could be wrong, but I think these are kind of spicy. Obviously, I'm not gonna read the synopsis for the third book, but I will for the first. It says, when a trip into the forest to collect a rare mushroom for her research goes horribly wrong, biologist Callie Peterson finds herself falling through a fairy portal and straight into the arms of the unseelie Fae prince. I feel like this is literally every book girlie's dream come true. Please let me fall through a magical portal in the forest. Okay, the rest of the synopsis is kind of funny. So it says, he thinks she's an assassin sent by the humans to kill him, not a scientist, and he imprisons her in his realm, where unwittingly, his obsession with her begins to grow. Oh, I love that. And that's really honestly all I want to read. I'm really sorry for the people that want like full-on descriptions of these books because I'm not the one. I want some mystery when I go into a book, but I still also want to like inform you guys of books that I'm excited for, you know? So anyway, hopefully that's not annoying. Last but not least, for January releases, we have Barbarian's Heart by Ruby Dixon. This is the 9th book in a 21 book series. I've been very slowly kind of working my way through the series. Basically, I read or like binged the first 4 books and then came to a complete halt and haven't read anything for months. But I definitely do want to pick up the next book this month because it's Ice Planet Barbarians. It's literally about some humans that were abducted by some aliens, but then they shipwrecked onto a different alien planet, which is the aliens that the rest of the series is about. And they're basically smut books involving aliens and human couples. And it's just so good. And they are on an ice planet, hence the Ice Planet Barbarians name. So I feel like it's a really good series to read during the winter. But basically, the reason I'm pointing this one out, because all 21 books are released for this series. They're all on Kindle Unlimited. However, the author is actually slowly coming out with new covers for the books. I have all of the first 8 that are released, but now we have a 9th one, and I am so stinking excited for it because I think about a month ago, I was on the author's TikTok, and she had mentioned that as of right now, as of that TikTok, the first 8 books were the only ones that were contracted to get new covers. But with this 9th one getting a cover as well, it makes me feel like they are going to be continuing and doing new covers for all of them. Those are all of our January releases. Moving on to our February releases, we have, again, a couple of different release days. The first one is the 4th, and we only have 1 book for this one, but it's one that I'm really excited for, and I think a lot of you will also be really excited for because it's a book by Ali Hazelwood. This one is called Deep End. From the cover, it definitely looks like it's going to be more of like a summer read, like something I'll save for the summer because they're literally in a pool. And this one, if I remember correctly, is about like some swimmers or something. A competitive diver and an ace swimmer jump into a forbidden waters in this steamy college romance. Again, I don't want to be annoying. I kind of want to go into this one more blind. I read the synopsis for this when I first put it on the list, and I remember it not being like the most intriguing concept to me, so I kind of want to, now that I have forgotten, leave it forgotten. I hope that makes sense. But it is a college romance between a diver and a swimmer. Our next release date for February, we have the 11th, and I've got a few books releasing. The first one being Scythe and Sparrow by Bryn Weaver, which is the 3rd book in the Butcher and Blackbird series. I cannot wait for this freaking book. This is a series that I actually have read the first 2 books of, and I was absolutely obsessed with them. The plot of the first book, Butcher and Blackbird, is basically a rom-com style romance between 2 serial killers, which was so bizarre, but like in the best way. And then these next 2 books are basically about other characters that we kind of get to know throughout the series. So I don't really want to say the synopsis for this one, just in case you haven't read the first one. I don't want to like give any kind of like connections away, but I am very excited. The contents of the books are kind of darker, but they're done with a very comedic kind of tone, and they're just like such fun reads. And also they are spicy, which I love. Next up, we have Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales by Heather Fawcett. This is also the 3rd book in a series. I have read the first book, and the 2nd book I own, but I haven't read it yet. I meant to read it in the spring, it just never happened, so maybe I'll read it this month. Probably not though, because I have a ton of other things I want to read. I just have not been in the mood this year for like slower paced books, and these ones definitely are slower paced. At least the first one was. And again, because this is the 3rd book in a series and it is kind of like a continuous story, I'm not gonna read the synopsis for this one. But as far as like the general concept of the series or like the first book, it's basically about like a scientist who is like studying fairies and things like that, and adventures ensue. Next up, we have The Rose Bargain by Sasha Payton Smith. Ooh, okay. It's been a while since I've read the synopses for these books. Vying for the hand of one brother, falling in love with the other. Ooh, that is like my favorite. I hate a love triangle, but for whatever reason, I love that kind of concept. Like going into something, intending on doing one thing, and then picking the other brother, you know? This one says, London, 1848. For 400 years, England has been under the control of an immortal Fey queen who tricked her way onto the throne. To maintain an illusion of benevolence, Queen Moore grants each of her subjects an opportunity to bargain for their deepest desire. As Ivy Benton prepares to make her debut, she knows that not even a deal with the queen could fix what's gone wrong. Her family's social standing is in shambles, her sister is a shadow of her former self, and Ivy's marriage prospects are non-existent. So when the queen announces a competition for Prince Bram's hand, Ivy's the first to sign her name in blood. Ivy soon finds herself a surprising frontrunner with the help of an unexpected ally, Prince Bram's brother, the rakish Prince Emmett, who promises to help Ivy win his brother's heart for a price. But as the season sweeps Ivy away with glittering balls veiling the queen's increasingly vicious trials, Ivy realizes there's more at stake than just a wedding, because all fairy bargains come with a cost, and Ivy may discover hers too late. I love everything about that synopsis. Everything about it. The next book on the list is The First Time Caller by B.K. Borison. This one looks like it's gonna be so stinking cute. So this one is basically about someone that has a radio show. It says, Aiden Valentine has a secret. He's fallen out of love with love. And as the host of Baltimore's romance hotline, that's a bit of a problem. And then apparently a young girl calls in on her mom's behalf because her mom is like struggling with dating. And I'm assuming the mom then goes on the show and the host and the mom end up having a romance. I'm really excited about this one. I think this will be a really good like Valentine's Day read. It does come out on the 11th, so a couple of days before Valentine's Day, and I will definitely be reading that one. Now, last but certainly not least for this entire list, we have a release for February 18th, and that is Rebel Witch by Christina Cicerelli. This is the sequel to Heartless Hunter, which, again, the theme of this video is a series that I have not read, but I want to start. Heartless Hunter, I feel like, was another really popular book this year where everyone was just like raving and raving about it. That being said, I don't even know what it's about, so let's find out. It says it's a steamy game of cat and mouse between witch and witch hunter. A witch and witch hunter that sounds very similar to, ooh, what is that series called? Serpent and Dove. That series was a witch and witch hunter kind of vibe, and I loved that series, so I'm definitely intrigued to read another one like that. Ooh, okay, so this one is about Rune, and it says she spends her nights as the Crimson Moth, a witch vigilante who rescues her kind from being purged. When a rescue goes wrong, she decides to throw the witch hunters off her scent and gain the intel she desperately needs by courting the handsome Gideon Sharp, a notorious and unforgiving witch hunter loyal to the revolution, who she can't help but find herself falling for. Yeah, that's very like Serpent and Dove coded, but also not at the same time. The witch and witch hunter like slow burn tension-filled romance from Serpent and Dove was one of my favorites, so I'm very excited to get something that sounds very similar to that. And the best news ever, it does say that it's a duology, which means this second book is going to be the last of the series. And as much as I love a long, lengthy fantasy series, I feel like this year I've just started so many where the next book is not going to be coming out until like the end of next year, or a release date is not even like mentioned yet. It's so far out, and I just cannot add another one. I literally just finished the 4th book in the Beast of the Briar series, which I have been absolutely devouring, and for whatever reason I was under the impression that that was the last book in the series. It is not. There's gonna be a total of 7, and I was trying to find a release date for the next book, and it's one of those ones where like there's no date even in the books. The only thing I could find was like a TikTok, I think from like a couple of months ago, where the author was showing that she was starting to write it. And then I have to wait for 2 more books after that one. I can't do it again. I can't do any more of that right now. Anyway, those are all of the books that kind of like caught my eye that are going to be released this winter. And per usual, if there's any that you're excited for that I didn't mention, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. I think that's everything that I had to say. I hope you guys have had the most amazing of days. I hope you're enjoying Bookmas. I'm so behind right now. I think I'm supposed to be on like day 7 or 8 or something like that. We're on day 4, and I don't really know what I'm going to be filming for day 5 yet, so hopefully you'll see me again in a couple of days.